Hi, everyone. We're adding this in because we forgot to do it. But basically, we need to give you this info. So starting next week, the next episode we're going to do on moral codes is going to be our first Patreon exclusive episode. So we're starting a Patreon, and we're going to have 3 tiers that are relatively affordable. The first one is just to get like free episodes. It's going to be every 3rd episode that's only available to Patreon members.
Mm-hmm.
The second tier will give you those 3 episodes plus access to our Discord. We're going to have a Discord server. Mm-hmm. Joseph and I are very active on Discord, so you're going to have a good time.
It's true, but I don't like that label. Yeah.
Okay. And then the third one is just if you like us and you have a lot of money. So the third one is just like $10 a month, and there's no difference. You just are giving us more money. We hope that we do get some patrons on our Patreon. We really enjoy doing this podcast, and we're not looking forward to having more complicated taxes, but we are going to be able to go a bit more into topics that touch on our personal lives through doing these private episodes. Like the next one on moral codes, I'm going to get to talk about why I'm a freak who has never had alcohol. Yeah. And Joseph, I don't actually know your moral principles that much, but I'm going to learn about them. Yeah, there's other topics that we're probably going to do that will be exclusive. Like there's one that we're going to amp up eventually called Male Desire. We'll finally do the Millennial Nihilism one. But yeah, we're going to get into topics that go into things that are a bit more related to our personal lives.
Yeah.
So hope to get some subscribers, and I hope you enjoy this episode on bike skepticism.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome to Silent Generation. I'm Joseph.
I'm Nathan.
And this week's topic is bike skepticism, is what we're kind of calling it. It's definitely like a more urbanist kind of topic, but I'm a big time cyclist. I don't really like identifying as it too much, but if I bike a lot, I guess I am a cyclist. And then Nathan.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of came up with this word in response to me upon meeting me and us having conversations about urbanism, because generally in urbanist circles, a lot of them are coming at the topic from a biking angle. Like there's just not bikes. And yeah, their obsession with the Netherlands is, their idea of urbanism is just like bike infrastructure.
Yeah.
For me, I don't bike. I haven't biked since I was a small child. I view urbanism from like a pedestrian and a transit user angle. And so I'm more critical of like the things that they want. And I can see like things behind their psychology and that have always sort of troubled me, like just a certain like entitlement or anger that I see also in drivers, but not in pedestrians.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's where my skepticism came from, although I'll get into that more. But yeah, this episode was an opportunity for me to sort of like evaluate why I have this type of bias and if it's justified or not. And we'll get into that.
And for me, it was a kind of a chance to try and step outside the like bike content bubble I can sometimes find myself in and really think about it from like other people's perspectives. Cause I don't know, I think this episode would have been different if I had even recorded it like 4 months ago when I was biking less, driving more. But my like recent pivot to more cycling has changed stuff a bit.
Yeah, you had such an easy time working on this week's episode.
Yeah, I was just churning out words. I don't know. It's just, in terms of the whole big conversation of how people get around cities, like there's like a different amounts of focus you can put on cycling. Either it's like at the forefront or it's just kind of a natural thing that occurs when you pedestrianize spaces. But yeah, we'll get into it. I don't know. I guess what do we want to talk about first? Like the whole temperament kind of question?
Yeah, I guess we can start out by sort of going into why I am bike skeptical. And one of those things is that, as I mentioned a moment ago, is that I think that like the temperament of cyclists is similar to drivers. And I realized in doing this week's episode that I can trace it back to this particular incident that happened to me in childhood, where I didn't really experience it directly. But I was in like a Cub Scout troop, and the troop, we all got bikes for the day, and then we drove the bikes along the Lakeshore Drive bike trail. Is there a specific name for that?
The Lakefront Path.
The Lakefront Path.
LFP.
Yeah, so I did that when we must have been at least like 10 something, 11, something like that. And so, yeah, we took the bikes down to the zoo. We went to the zoo, and then we were about to leave. And then as we were going back on the trail, there was this guy in like head to toe, like professional bike clothing, going full speed, who almost hit one of the Cub Scouts, and he had to like slam his brakes and like almost went over him. And then he like was furious and called my childhood friend a bunch of swear words, and everyone was just like dead silent. And then the whole ride back, everyone was just like quiet. And so I feel like usually when I hear stories about bikers, it's like someone got hit by one. Like actually, today I was at the gym. I talked to someone. I mentioned the episode I'm about to do, and they mentioned another person who goes to our gym who recently got hit by a cyclist, and the cyclist was mad at them about it, even though they hit them just when they were crossing the street. And yeah, I just feel like all the stories I hear have just like created this image in my mind of like cyclists who want to go really fast and get in collisions, which as a pedestrian, I can't get in collisions.
No, you can get collided with, but you cannot like cause one. No, the derogatory term for that style of cyclist on your Boy Scout trip was a Lakefront Lance. You ever heard that
Lakefront
term?
Lance?
Yeah, it's someone like Lance Armstrong, basically. Like someone who takes themselves super seriously and like really tries to churn out numbers and performance on the Lakefront Trail. People often reference the app Strava. You ever heard of that? People use it for running. But yeah, you use your phone to like track GPS-wise your workouts and stuff. And so like, I don't know, this line I've heard is like, yeah, those Lakefront Lances chasing their Strava times at the expense of like people trying to have a good time on the Lakefront Trail on the weekend. Yeah, I remember one time I was with an ex and we were at the beach and we had a few beers and we're walking back through this like pedestrian tunnel basically and at Promontory Point in Hyde Park, and someone like full road bike gear like speeds through the tunnel, and my ex is just like, "Hey, cool it, Lance!" He just yells at him, and I'm just like, "Come on!" Like it's one of those things. Like you've never had a girlfriend, so you don't know, but like sometimes girls will like act out in a way when you're there because they know that like you'll kind of have to like, you'll protect them. Like it can be very harmless and innocuous. Like in this situation, I think it was harmless and innocuous. But it's like, come on, now I have to deal with this, and the guy just kept going on his way. I don't think those guys often dismount and like get into altercations too much. But yeah, it's American cycling culture. Like for a quick historical thing on it, like when bikes were first invented, they created a huge craze and they just like exploded in cities. Like as you watch, you know, like the earliest film videos are just tons and tons of people on bicycles and like old timey clothes. But then as cars emerged, they kind of quashed the bicycle explosion. And then in America, there was a brief 1970s bike boom, like kind of spurred by an exercise interest in the 70s when people started jogging and stuff. Yeah. But also the oil crisis and just the beginnings of environmentalism as well. But then that kind of was more of a fad and faded away. There's some places that have like legacy bike infrastructure from that period, but not a lot of places do. So I think that starting in the early 2010s, we entered another bike boom. Yeah. Basically. And like a lot of people believe that too. And I think we're in the middle of one currently. And that's spurred on by like economic frustrations at car ownership.
Yeah, it was during the Great Recession.
Yeah, basically. And people realizing how like they had built their lives around their cars in a lot of ways. I think e-bikes helped spur this current phase that we're in as well. But even in this phase, like we're drawing upon that kind of recreational background that we had originally.
Yeah. And another thing that goes hand in hand with the temperament. So it's the anger that they get and they express towards like pedestrians, other cyclists and drivers. But another part of the temperament is also just like I mean, when I first started thinking about this, I thought of it as entitlement, but now I wouldn't use words as strong, but just like, you know, how they just need and they demand so much infrastructure and dedicated space,
like demarcated, dedicated, separated space. Yeah.
And I realized through doing this episode, well, I've kind of known this for a while, but I love how organic, like early 20th century streets were. Like we're going to link a video in the episode description to a video that was taken from the back or the front of a streetcar, you know, 100 years ago. And you can see like pedestrians, cyclists, horses and carriages, streetcars, cars, like all of these different transit modes interacting without dedicated spaces.
Yeah, with just like informal eye contact, like checking if people are going, just like small negotiations, basically made like with very little brain effort at all, just kind of seamlessly moving together like a school of fish. Kind of.
And so like a cyclist, or I mean, avid cyclist would listen to this and be like, what is he trying to go for? Like,
what is your goal? Victorian times? Yeah.
Or no, but they'd be like, no, you need like dedicated lanes to bike, because cars also need dedicated lanes. I mean, honestly, I don't think we can really undo how we have dedicated lanes for every mode of transit modes, now. I mean, even bus lanes and sidewalks are dedicated pedestrian spaces. And I don't really think we can undo this. American drivers are too crazy. But
there's always going to be like an American desire for formalization and distinction between things. But that's how that video is from 100 years ago or forever. But in looking at how people get around in different cities today in the modern world, there definitely is a spectrum of how demarcated places like it. With America feeling like the most demarcated, and then I posted in our docket, also Japan is very undemarcated, and I think that it says a lot about like level of societal trust. If you put that on a spectrum of America having the lowest societal trust, basically, I don't think of every country. I'm sure that like I would say any country that's recently survived a civil war is always going to have the lowest societal trust. They always talk about that. Like I was listening to some radio program about like living in Cambodia after the end of the like Khmer Rouge genocide and all that, and just the complete collapse of trust between people, because like everyone was literally ratting each other out to the government. And so that is like the lowest it can get in societal trust. And then the most being Japan, basically, where everyone is just on the same page about like their purpose and their place in a city and how to negotiate that. So if you watch like cycling videos in Japan, there's not a lot of bike lanes. There's not even a lot of separation on small side streets between pedestrian and car spaces. Cars move very slowly. People move at walking speed, and bikes behave in the middle, Definitely not fast is what I'd say, but just kind of like a fast pedestrian, which is like a slow car.
Yeah. I mean, the only way we could get back to, streets just being one big mixed transit space is if cars were to get like to have like much lower
limiters,
they couldn't go above say 30 miles per hour, which, knowing the auto industry in this country and how SUVs have just come out of like skirting regulations, no. The odds of that happening are like impossible in my lifetime.
I remember thinking as a child, just like when you're bored in a car, I would just look around, and I always noticed like our Honda Odyssey, the speedometer goes up to 120 miles an hour, and I was just as a kid like, why is that allowed? And then learning that like the highest speed limits in America, I believe there's one stretch that's 85 somewhere, but Texas has like an 80 pretty commonly. But then every car is capable of doing 95 and 100. And it comes up as a political like thing every so often. It'll be a bill that gets shot down of like, limit all cars to that. European cars, all the makers got together and implemented like 120 mile limit on cars, which is just like it was them saying like, look, we can regulate ourselves by doing something very useless, basically. It's like, this way people won't go 130. That's where it's dangerous.
Yeah, because something that people should know, our listeners, you should know this. Okay, so in Chicago, say you are going 30 miles per hour and you hit a pedestrian. They have a 90% chance of survival. They're going to get seriously hurt, but odds are they'll live.
Wait, what was that number you get?
So if a pedestrian gets hit by a car, they have a 90% chance of surviving at 30 miles per hour. But at 40 miles per hour, the odds drop to 10% or less.
Yeah.
So when people in Chicago complain about the
speed cameras,
they complain about speed cameras, but also getting speeding tickets at like 9 or 10 miles above the speed limit. Every single 1 mile per hour increment between 30 and 40 increases odds of a pedestrian dying by like 10%.
Yeah.
So, with Lori Lightfoot lowering the speed limit ticketing threshold from like 9 or 10 to 6 miles per hour, that does result in people
living.
Yeah, living. So when I hear drivers complain about, we can only go 6 miles over the speed limit now, they don't realize that 36 compared to 39 or 40 miles per hour is a huge difference. Yeah.
This is, at least in my like construction-y world and stuff, this is like a common just like small talk conversation that people have about driving in the city when you have like, I don't know, maybe not much in common with someone. Like, there's like, Daily really screwed the meter deal. Like that's a very classic, to non-Chicago people, we sold off our parking meters to this like multinational corporation, and it's been regarded as the dumbest deal of all time.
Yeah.
And
It's like it's largely owned by Saudi Arabians now.
Yeah, something like that. Emiratis or Saudis, yeah. And so it's just like something that all people in Chicago can always get on the same page on, like, the meters deal. Like it's just something to be mad about. And another thing is everyone is like, those frickin' speeding cameras. And if I'm not feeling combative that day, I'll just be like, yeah, they're the worst or whatever.
Yeah.
But the truth is, like, if you actually ask me what I really think, they don't affect me. I am not affected by speeding cameras because I do not speed. Like, but it just sounds very smug to people when I say that, because it's like, it's impossible for me to get ticketed for being on my phone or speeding because I don't do it. So there's just like, you can put as many of them up as you want. Like, I don't know. But then that just sounds like I'm like flexing on them. But it's just like part of, I don't know. I've always had this very neurotic approach to driving where like, if we really confronted the reality of driving every day, it should drive you a little bit crazy. That like you're entering these roads in a 3,000 pound like death machine and everyone is at your mercy and you should act like that. Like, they say there's like two types of like brain intensity in terms of activities, like A or B. Like there's stuff you can just do mindlessly and there's stuff you have to do consciously. And they say that driving is one of those things that we've made cars so good nowadays, you can do it mindlessly. And I believe that like through enough effort, it should be not mindless. I think it should be like, like fully focused. I mean, I'll take a phone call when I'm like driving on my AirPods or something, but I try not to do that too much anymore. But it's like,
I mean, I can
in
believe
city
that.
Driving, it should be full focus at all times.
Yeah, every time I'm in like a newer car, which is actually pretty rare, like I'm not in cars that often, even being driven around. But yeah, I'm not in them that often. But when I'm in a new one, I'm always like, what are all of these things that it can do?
No, I feel like my car's from 2007. And I remember I'd worked a job and I got into like a brand new like 2022 Mercedes SUV. And I felt like a caveman who had been taken into a spaceship. Like I didn't know where we were in technology. I hadn't there's a heads up display. It does like an augmented reality overlay of like directions and stuff. It's just, I don't know.
Yeah, it's like,
it's just so smooth too. Cars are so smooth nowadays that like they really change the speed conversation as well at the higher ends. Like cars, I think feel pretty similar in that like 0 to 35, 40 range. But like, going like 70 in new cars feels like 40 in my car. Is kind of crazy.
Yeah, on that makes me think of this meme I saw recently where like Caitlyn Jenner made some tweet, but it said at the bottom like Twitter for SUV.
Twitter for SUV.
Like she tweeted it out from her SUV, but like that's how like advanced the technology is now.
But the background of that is that she killed someone in an SUV.
Oh wait, maybe that meme was fake then.
Yeah.
Okay. Never mind.
Yeah, no, Caitlyn Jenner like was distracted driving and killed someone and didn't have to suffer any consequences for it.
Yeah.
Matthew Broderick did the same thing. It's a very common urbanist talking point, but like we've restructured our legal system around the inherent risk of driving and that we have to insulate people from it because it is so inherently dangerous. Instead of confronting how dangerous it is, we need to just make a new category of like law and punishment. And then just like, and everyone gets to go home. Is the idea. Like if we just do this, then like we can continue as we were. Like we don't need to confront like the fact that every time you drive, you're very capable of killing someone.
Yeah. No, it sucks. Like I feel like the majority of the time when I read an article about like someone killing a pedestrian, they don't get jail time.
Yeah.
Which really shocks me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, it's just we've carved out a new category because of it, basically.
Yeah.
And then so famously, like we'll talk about the Netherlands a bit this episode, but like there were some cultural factors at play where like just Netherlands just did not accept this like new level of death that comes with cars. I don't know what they have that other countries don't, but yeah, they had this whole campaign called like, God, their language is so made up, but like stop kindermoord, like stop child murder, which usually like I'm always the one complaining of like, no name calling, nuance is everything and all that. But like that is pretty catchy. And yeah, as I was saying, I'm kind of anti-slogan sometimes. That's a pretty damn good slogan because it does make it so that anyone arguing against you is arguing for child murder. You kind of put them into a box. So like in the kind of cage match style of debate, I feel like it's a pretty good move to just accuse other people of killing children. But yeah, and so they were just as car dependent as kind of we were in the 50s and 60s, and then they just completely turned things around and went all cycle
it's well
infrastructure
documented.
crazy.
There are like memes that circulate where you can see pictures of like what the Netherlands looked like in the 70s compared to today, and like they've fully pedestrianized streets in a way that you like don't see in America.
Yeah. But yeah, and then so my experience with like bike cyclist temperament, I think that biking in America does, as I said, driving drives you a little bit crazy. Biking drives you crazy in a different way, because it's not that you're capable of killing people all the time. It's that you're always in danger all the time. And so you become this kind of like cornered dog that starts to lash out at what seem like small things. So myself, I will yell at people. I will say when they're doing dangerous stuff. That's just probably because I'm annoying and I have a strong sense of justice. No, but like if someone's blocking the bike lane, I'll just say like, move to them. I'll do that in their car. But they're so like, the people who block bike lanes, like they have no idea what's going on. Like, you can just kind of see in their eyes, they just kind of have this, like, they hadn't even thought about it at all. Like, it's not that like, oh, nice, there's a spot in the bike lane. They just don't like perceive or see them. They're from usually like places where they don't bike. They don't think about it. Like, it's none of that. And I saw this annoying discussion on like the Chicago bike subreddit where people are like, it was one of the mods or something. It's like, oh, you want to see less posts about people blocking bike lanes? No, they're important. Blocking a bike lane is an act of violence against cyclists. And I just think that's so like rhetorically just pouring fuel on a fire. Like, even if that's true, that it causes someone to experience, I guess, violence, I just always think that the word violence should have some kind of intent to it. I think that intent really matters. And so in the rest of this post, this guy says that like it's violent to block a bike lane and it is less violent to like retaliate against that car. A classic thing people always talk about is like, I'm just going to take a U-lock to his mirror. These people don't actually do that frequently. But that is more violent. Like, yes, it's just property damage as opposed to life damage, but like, no, if you're like vigorously like bringing something down on people, like not to focus overly on aesthetics and what things look like versus their actual actions, but like that stuff matters. Like, you're going to remember if someone smashed your car with a U-lock, you're going to feel like you experienced violence and the threat of violence. No,
I feel like if I were biking, it would be very easy to just get off the bike and then walk around it on the sidewalk, But I guess it's like the speed thing where like they don't want to be interrupted.
So it's not because of curbs and stuff, kind of like when someone blocks the bike lane, you are more pushed into traffic than you are onto sidewalks because there's usually other parked cars there. So that's what they're always complaining about, is that like you've pushed a cyclist into car traffic, therefore endangering them. But like,
oh, I see what you mean.
I don't know. I encounter.
I'm really thin, so I'm always like, I'll just squeeze through it.
No, I actually do like that about having kind of a narrow, sportier bike, because I can easily squeeze between things. But yeah, I don't know. And that's also one of those things of like, the city wants to get more aggressive about ticketing people in bike lanes and stuff, and that also like doesn't affect me because I've never parked in one ever. So but I've heard other people complain about it.
And then you wrote a bit about the aesthetics of bikes and cyclists.
Yeah, so in America, like, since our cycling culture comes from this sporty, recreational, like biking for exercise culture, when you see people bike commute, you'll often see them in much different clothes than people in Europe. Like in Europe, people just wear their regular clothes and they hop on their bike. And their bikes reflect this. Like, their bikes have very upright posture, so you can wear any clothes and they're not going to like tug or be tight or anything. But in America, we're in a more like hunched over, aggressive, sporty, speedy position. People won't have fenders sometimes, so lots of like road muck will get on them. So they'll often be wearing like one pair of clothes to get to work in, and they get to work and they change clothes for like their job. And I think that, I don't know, just the vibe is off there. It's like you saying like there is cycling mode and then there is life mode. Like, cycling is just a brief period I have to get to the life. And it's like, no, they should be kind of mixed together. And I bike in regular clothes when I'm going to work and stuff. I just think, and I use like the rental divvy bikes where you have this more upright kind of posture. I just think it's just better for you when you're hunched over and like focused on speed and wearing all this functional clothes. Like, I don't know. I don't think it just looks bad. Like, I don't need to elaborate too much on that, but
you look less hot.
And also drivers are more dangerous to you. They've done studies on this, but like in terms of, they can measure like how much space a car gives a cyclist, and cars give the most space to women not wearing bike helmets. The idea is that like people just give them more kindness, basically.
Yeah.
And then men wearing bike helmets in spandex, people pass them very closely. They're like kind of don't read as humans is the thing.
Yeah. But yeah, I think on them not being perceived as humans, I think that this might also cause the people donning these outfits to experience some degree of de-individuation or depersonalization. These are concepts we talked about in the Men in Uniform episode, but basically when the elements that you use to identify yourself with, say like the outfit that you wear to work, are taken away temporarily, and you are wearing a helmet and say like sunglasses or a visor, and you're just stripped down to utility, then you start to behave in ways that are like less human and empathetic. You know, this explains the Stanford prison experiment. And so, yeah, maybe some of the anger that I see bikers direct at the whole world could be because they just like also in this experience feel alienated.
Yeah. I think there's a line between like aesthetics and language in this sense too, where like when you told your story about getting hit by that cyclist, the fact that he was dressed like that means that you called him a cyclist. Yeah. You know, it wasn't a guy on a bike, like person on a bike. This guy almost hit us. No, this cyclist almost hit us. Like he becomes the bike also in a way because he's wearing the clothing of it. And yeah, versus like if he was wearing regular clothes and on a more like commuter style bike, it wouldn't have read as cyclist in your mind. And I think that, yeah, when you're in that getup, I think it's kind of a self-reinforcing thing of like, I'm in clothes that I wear so I can be faster. So I should go faster. So I am a cyclist so that, and then if you're in a pack of cyclists too, like totally, they call it a peloton. It's like a group of cyclists, and you do become like a school of fish. Like if you watch the Tour de France and stuff, how tightly and closely they're like moving in unison and reading each other's body language and stuff. Like there is a like de-individuation that happens for safety. Basically, you're all moving as one, anticipating each other's braking, slipping behind each other. Yeah.
You know what that just made me think of? Did you ever play Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire?
Of course.
Yeah, there's like a bike highway.
Yeah, they have like an elevated bike path thing. Yeah.
But yeah, there's a Pokemon trainer class, the biker or the cyclist. And I remember like when they'd catch you or they'd hit you, they'd be all mad, and then they'd start a Pokemon battle and they'd be all pissed.
You're right. Maybe this is also where your bike skepticism comes from, being on the biking road and getting accosted by Pokemon trainers. Yeah, and they all were very aggressive. I do remember that.
Yeah, and they really fit the like cyclist archetype with their outfits.
Yeah, they're wearing the wraparound shades and all that. Another thing we touched on in a past episode was the like the social breakdown that happens with hiding your eyes, basically.
Yeah, I mean, that's like a big factor in de-individuation. I mean, you especially see this with police officers, I think. But yeah, when they hide their eyes, they just like don't recognize the humanity of other people as much.
Like the feedback loop of stuff breaks down. Like the person interacting with you doesn't trust you. You don't trust them. Like this kind of thing just kicks off.
Yeah.
So another type of like non-recreational cyclists, but not exactly a cycling commuter, is bike messengers. Since I work in River North, which is like this very like live work area in Chicago, you see a lot of them. I see kind of the same ones sometimes. They have pretty distinctive bikes sometimes. Some of them have the like front loading cargo bikes, and those just always stand out to me because they're kind of rare. But their vibes are off as well too. I'm also going to complain about them. So bike messengers have been around like forever, like since the 70s and 80s, like because traffic is just so bad. And just transporting physical documents was their main thing they started with. And then when email became a thing, it totally cratered out the industry. But then out of nowhere, when food delivery apps became a thing, like the bike courier was resuscitated, I would say, as a job, and became probably bigger than ever. But there's definitely like, I don't know, they are gig workers, basically, if they're doing it through an app, you know?
Yeah, and I think that along with other forms of gig work, it's a bit socially stigmatized. I think that people view gig work as being like the last barrier to homelessness and unemployment, and they are not like really well respected in society. Like there's this HBO original series that I really like called Years and Years. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
It's very interesting. It covers like this family as they react to changes culturally and economically that happen in the near future. Like I think the series ends in like 2032 or something. Oh. But yeah, they like there's like a pandemic that happens, and like a nuclear bomb goes off in Asia, and there's all these like crazy things that happen. But one of the characters, he's like a accountant for like an investment bank, which in London, like that's basically their whole economy is banking.
Yeah.
And he loses his job, and then he becomes like a food delivery cyclist later on in the series. And it's portrayed as just being very like abysmal and sad that he had this like tragic fall from grace.
Yeah.
And yeah, I feel like that's how it's viewed. Is like it only happens to people who tragedy occurs in their lives. Like they have to do that as a last resort.
Yeah. So I had a brief career as a delivery cyclist. This was in college. And it was like in winter, basically. I just got this idea of like, oh, I can just download Uber Eats and deliver stuff like that and make some side money. I did it for a bit, and it was interesting. Like I biked from the south side to the Loop, and then I picked up something in the Loop and delivered it a little bit north. And then the app kind of dragged me up north until I was in like Edgewater or so.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting thing to see, because you're just subject to the whims of this app. But it is inherently a little bit undignified, especially when it's cold out, because just emerging into a restaurant and I'm like wrapped up in all this weather gear, and I'm like snotty because it was cold out, and I have to like take off all these layers to free my hands to use the app and show them the code.
Yeah.
And all that. It's a little undignified. And then I'd go to like a fancy either office if someone's like working late to deliver something, or like a nice residential place. And so I'm in this like beautiful lobby, and a lot of people had it set up where I'd actually like, go up their elevator and deliver straight to their apartment door.
Yeah.
So that was always interesting. A few times I do get stuff delivered, I'm just like, leave it in the lobby. Like, don't bother all that. Your car is probably blocking people in the street, like just leave it in the lobby and get out of here. But yeah, so it was like fun to be a little interloper in places I probably wouldn't like go again. And then I was like, God, yeah, I'm just gonna keep on doing this. And then the next weekend I broke my foot, not doing that, doing something else. Yeah. And that was the end of my career. I've thought about getting back into it. It just, I don't know, there's some like, it's not full of hidden costs like doing food delivery by car is, it's a bike.
Yeah.
But like, I remember thinking like, if I get one flat tire, then I'll have to buy a new tube and maybe a new tire if it's a really bad damage. And that's like, that'd be $50 probably. And that would like eat into a lot of, deliveries. And then I had bought a nice fancy phone mount for, to mount my phone to my bike. And then because of the cold, the adhesive failed. My phone like went clattering down the street. Luckily it was fine because I had a good case on it. But I was like, that would feel very dumb if in the bid to like make a little bit of side money, I break my iPhone and have to get a new one. And the phone mount was not cheap either. So I'm always like skeptical of overhead in any way when it comes to like side and gig work.
Yeah.
Because like that is one of the appeals of working like a conventional either salaried or hourly job is like there's very little overhead to you operating and working there. And people are very bad at perceiving actual overheads.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, there are people who do make money from gig work, but when they factor in like the costs, particularly for like Lyft and Uber drivers, they add up so much to the point that they're making like only a few dollars per hour. On food delivery, I've never delivered food, but I also don't like to order food delivered to me. I only maybe do that like once a year for pizza, maybe or something. But yeah, overall, I've always had this ethos, like I don't like to ask people to do something I wouldn't do in terms of like my economic decisions, because as a consumer, like you vote with your dollar. Yeah. And so that's why like I always have supported American Apparel and Los Angeles Apparel, because they don't use sweatshops. I mean, I'm really not good about this now, but I was vegetarian for like many years because I wouldn't want to work in a slaughterhouse. But yeah, I try to make decisions like that, and I would not want to do gig work. And so I'd rather just go to the restaurant and pick it up myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I only get either pizza or Chinese delivered. I think that because those have been from the get, from like the 60s and
Lindy.
70s. It's Lindy. It's an established thing. They travel well. Like we figured out the only stuff that can be delivered then, and then we've tried other things. Never get a burger delivered, never do fries delivered, any of that stuff.
Fries especially.
Yeah, it's so ill-advised. And I don't know, I wish more places actually had their own like not salaried, but hourly delivery drivers and not just gig stuff like that. I think some Chinese places still have it. I always try and order like through a website and also just make it a rare thing.
Yeah.
Well.
No, I will just call places and pick stuff up. I don't ever really go through Uber Eats or any of those apps.
But yeah, so also with bike messengers, I think to signal that they're not doing this out of the forces of an economy, they adopt like a whole kind of established aesthetic that's very punky and alternative. In Chicago, there's Cut Cat's Couriers. I see them. And so they're they're kind of formed out of like, I think, rebellion against the food delivery apps and stuff. They're an actual company, and they have like, I'm sure they're unionized too, because I think they really like to, you know, play into those aesthetics too. But I see them, and they all have like jean shorts, and they're wearing like black stuff with like crazy designs on it, and like heavy metal bands and stuff. And they always have like tattoos, gauges, or not always gauges, but piercings and stuff. They have to like, there's this whole look you have to have where you're signaling like, no, this is a lifestyle. I'm not poor. I'm actually alternative.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've never gotten stuff delivered by them. At my company, we use couriers to send like materials to subcontractors and to stuff like that. And so they like come into the office, and they always do have the look. And their bikes themselves like often have tons of stickers and stuff on them. I think that's a look they have to do as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think that for people who are thrust into like low wage work, signaling to society at large that you are deciding to do that job is a way to sort of deflect from any sort of contempt that society might direct at you. I think I see this too a little bit with chefs. Like they will sometimes get like tattoos all over their forearms about cooking. And it's to signal like, no, I like this, which they probably do. I mean, people find different ways to like their jobs, but yeah, they need to do that. They want to show people in a way that like people who do white collar work don't necessarily do. Yeah. And then on the stickers thing, do you remember when like Adam Levine did the halftime Super Bowl show?
I remember this.
He had like, he'd gotten all of these tattoos all over his torso pretty recently, and they had like fresh ink. And I remember seeing on social media people saying that like he looked bad because it was too fresh. Yeah. And I feel like stickers on construction helmets or stickers on bikes are the same thing, where like you need to have at least some of them be aged. They need to be different. They need to accumulate slowly. Otherwise, it looks kind of bad.
Yeah, that's battle jackets is a thing for, you know, like punk people, is they get all these patches and they sew them onto like a denim vest or jacket.
Yeah.
And I think it's like people will make fun of you if you have like all of these pristine patches, because it shows you're just like an internet
newbie.
LARPer. Yeah. Or you're someone who like wanted to skip ahead and like unlock the final thing basically. But then from the get, it can just look fake.
Yeah.
We don't have this so much in Chicago, but I noticed this in New York City with like bike delivery stuff, is that there's just two types. There's the aforementioned, what we talked about, the like, I'm alternative, like I wouldn't be able to do an office job, it's just me in the streets, food delivery guy. And then there's just like recent migrants to the US who like cannot work actual jobs due to our restrictions on immigrants working. And so they deliver like food by e-bike basically. And that's been like a whole kind of firebrand, like political firebrand of an issue in New York, because there's been these fires started by e-bike batteries, because all these delivery drivers buy like the cheapest possible, like Chinese made e-bikes that then light on fire in the basements of buildings. And there'll be buildings with like tons of food delivery bikes in the basement, like charging. So it's just turned into this whole like conversation about that. And that's it's so separate from like the punky food delivery guys are often not on e-bikes at all. Like I think they have a complex about it. Like it has to be that they're sweaty and like putting in work to deliver this acoustic.
Yeah. On e-bikes. So like Adam Something has a very good video on this where he critiques electric buses because they have like, if an electric bus catches on fire, it will melt down like a whole facility. It is such a big deal. Like the amount of water that firefighters need to put out a fire in an electric vehicle versus a conventional gasoline using vehicle, it's like magnitudes higher. Like, I mean, crazy. 20 times or even bigger. Like it's huge. And so like he was arguing that firefighting agencies, they're going to adopt a policy, if they haven't already, where like when electric vehicles catch on fire, you just let them burn out, because you can't really get it in the stop. And like, even if you put the fire out, usually it comes back because it's in the battery. Yeah. And like, it's just this really big problem. I've never really been one of those people where I think electric vehicles are the future. I think trains are the future. And all of the talk about electric vehicles has just been like a distraction from the way to actually solve the climate crisis. Sorry for that tangent, but I guess e-bikes set on fire too, which is a big problem.
The only like electric car I care about is who is making the most progress towards a small compact electric cargo van. Like, because even if we achieve some kind of urbanist utopia where everyone walks, bikes, transits around, like labor needs to get done, like construction and all that. So like if you look at how stuff gets done in Europe, it is these very small cargo vans, like Mercedes Metris vans and all these like even smaller ones. And so that's the kind of stuff that like, get that done. Because like,
well, you don't
even
think the Tesla truck counts?
No, I saw the Cybertruck for the first time, and it was like, the whole thing about it is that like the outside panels are just like pure stainless steel, you know, coated or aluminum. I forget what it is. It's not painted is the idea. And then this one I saw parked next to Water Tower Place in Chicago was like matte black. Of course, that's a very common thing done to like statement cars, is you make them like chalkboard black. It looked so dumb. It was just, I don't know, it just pissed me off. And then right after seeing that, I go to my office and I see the new Hummer, the new electric Hummer as well, like in one day. Like I had not, like I knew these cars were coming, but then just seeing both of them in River North in one day, I was just like, oh God, they're here. A new like plaything of the rich. Because it used to be like the conventional Hummer was, you know, in the mid 2000s, and then those were phased out. And then use of the Mercedes G-Wagon skyrocketed. I don't know if you can identify those.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
The very boxy, like these were like developed for the military by Mercedes, like a Mercedes Jeep basically. And then Rich Wheel found out about them. I heard from someone you can write them off on your taxes because they're like a light truck or something. I don't know if that's true. But yeah, you see them everywhere because like the Rich Wheel just need like the largest, most obnoxious thing to drive around. But hey, the Cybertruck and the Hummer, the electric Hummer, are here to save the day.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think for myself, when thinking about aesthetics in regards to biking and cyclists, for me, it's always been an aesthetic critique of bike lanes because they're like little plastic things that stick out of the street, which I learned for this week's episode are called plastic curbs.
They're not bollards?
Suck. No.
A bollard is like something you can really run into, right?
That's like a bollard is solid, where if you crash into it, your vehicle gets destroyed. But no, like if a car runs over a plastic curb, they'll hear a thwacking sound and it might cause a little bit of damage, but it doesn't like really stop you that much.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's always going to be like an ugly period of bike infrastructure. Paris is a good example of this. They have this like crazy lefty mayor who went on this like bike infrastructure spree, and they've like said it's a fast and dirty approach to safety.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think just putting up concrete barriers is like cheaper and looks better.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is something that like, I'm not sure if I'm going to be that effective at articulating this, but you know, we live in a world where we're inundated with neoliberalism. And one of the features of neoliberalism is like this element of control and regulation. And I think that when you look at these like freshly minted streets from urban planners where there's like a bike lane, a bus lane, there's even like weird stuff for pedestrians on the sidewalk. I mean,
like pedestrian flow. Like they try and map out the flow of pedestrians.
Yeah, there's just like weird stuff with the sidewalk even. But yeah, it's just everything is just categorized and put into its own little segmented spot, and that's your lane. And yeah, I mean, for me as like a strong towns person, Chuck Marohn has this idea of like complicated versus complex.
Yeah.
And so an example of like what could be complex is like what we've talked about with like streetcars 100 years ago and like contemporary examples in Japan. But then complicated is like what you see with these streets where they have a bike lane, bus lane. Everything's been like looked at to death by like transit engineers who have like way too much time, like probably literal consultants they're paying to do this. And they bill like, you know, hundreds of hours just to think about like how to move people.
It's the best like extant public spaces we have were not built by experts or master planners or any of this. Like we're a country of like overthinkers basically, and over consultants and sorters.
Yeah. But yeah, this is something that's like deeper, that's harder for me to articulate. But I think there is an aesthetic to control. And I mean, you saw this a lot during the pandemic, and you see it after the pandemic more than you did before. But just how every time I go to like a public institution, like say a museum, there's just like all these random exits that are blocked off, and there's like random lines that you have to go into. And
No, you're onto something here. Yeah, it's like, it's a firm, and it's, as we talk about like social contracts and all that, like they're really spelling it out more so nowadays, like through the built environment. Like we just need to actively signal things to people. This is the entrance for if you bought a ticket in advance to the museum. This is the like at will call. This is this. Like there is, it's all been thought about ahead of time. We're gonna solve this. We're gonna like, that's what I somehow got on some YouTube algorithm thing of just watching stuff on theme parks and realized how much theme parks had changed since I had last been at them. But it's like, all right, so if you buy your tickets online, then you're going to go to this kiosk when you get there in person. And then you better have the app because that's going to show you how to put yourself into these different digital queues. Yeah. And I'm like, what is that? Like, what is going on? But yeah, it's like we've really thought about everything.
Yeah. But with theme parks, that a little bit of what's going on there is what's called premiumization. Yeah. That's something that's happening across the entire economy where like it's why vehicles like the more affordable models are being phased out. They want you to buy like the bigger SUVs because like they weigh more. There's more material. You're going to pay more. It's just like more beneficial for them, for their bottom line. And yeah, with theme parks too, they've been raising the price of like Disney tickets where it's not a goal for them now to get like as many visitors to like Disney theme parks as they can. Instead, they'd rather like have it be higher and maybe like instead of a family being able to go to Disneyland once a year, a few times during their kids' childhood. Now it's once. And
one huge.
People are still willing to do it, but it's premiumization.
Yeah. No, I think we might have touched on this in a past episode, but like baseball stadiums or ballparks, as they should be called. Like more and more space gets eaten up by premium boxes, and it's just like changed the economics of it. Of like that is the main priority of ballparks, and then they just kind of like. You can't let the average Joe's experience get too shitty, you know, where people stop coming, but you just basically prioritize the like high level of premium service that you charge for those people. And then you just like, you also still have to let other people in, but it's just no longer the focus in terms of like the experience. Yeah. There's
segregation of consumers, even say you go into a Whole Foods where like you're a Prime member, you're not.
Isn't that
wild?
Yeah. It's dumb. Yeah. I mean, you're more ideologically consistent than me where you like don't use anything Amazon, but I am a Prime member.
No, actually I do go to Whole Foods sometimes.
but you're not a Prime member. There you go.
No, I'm not.
Yeah.
But wow, I feel
like I second class consumer.
It's like, I mean, it's great that I'm doing this podcast. It's great I finally have an outlet for all my thoughts, but like, why am I not like a college professor?
Why are you not a college professor?
I just feel like I articulated something so complex and interesting. Like,
I think that's definitely onto something. Yeah, like it's the fact that you can like perceive this when just like navigating an urban space of just like things are firming up. That's what I keep on, I guess, trying to express. I can't fully articulate it, but there's a lot less gray area and like everything's been sorted out now.
Yeah,
and then so on the broader subject of like bike skepticism and not just being a bike utopian, the limits of biking in America. So I think that like huge headways can be made in terms of number of people biking, the experience of biking in America, but there's just some things that are going to like always be there. I think people forget how like crazy the climate in America is. It's just different from like more temperate continental weather in Europe. Like the weather range in Amsterdam is like from the 40s to the like high 60s, mid 70s, aka the perfect biking weather. Like any colder and it's miserable, any hotter it's miserable. So like I think I have it in me to be like a full year cyclist, but that I don't know if a lot of people are going to do that. Like just walking outside, like good like properly dressed clothing is something that can really help, but I think it's just a huge mental hurdle for a lot of people. If it's 10 degrees outside, I understand you don't want to bike.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that like Chicago has the potential to become a biking utopia as much as, say, Los Angeles. There's a YouTuber, Nimesh, in Los Angeles who's really funny. He's this doctor who just makes these videos.
Yeah, he's a doctor. That's really funny to me. Like, I don't know, going to your doctor and then at the end of the visit, him being like, "Oh, you want to check out my urbanism YouTube channel?" I'd be like, "Aren't you busy? Like, aren't doctors famously busy?" But he has his cute little side project.
Yeah. But yeah, he has a video. It's his first one called Why Many Cities Suck and Los Angeles Doesn't Have to. And so in the video, he talks about like different cities he's lived in. And he talks about like how Los Angeles has this potential to become a biking utopia because of the weather. Because for people who haven't been to Los Angeles, it never really rains. It never really gets cold. And even when it's hot, like this was crazy to me. when I visited recently, but like I can just walk around in a jacket and I don't get sweaty. Like here in Chicago, when it's like 68, I can start to get sweaty in a jacket.
Yeah,
but there I could be there when it was like 80 in a jacket and feel fine. I didn't understand how that worked.
No, it's really cool. it's great. Yeah, and so it's like a huge just like benefit and boon to biking there, but it's just been squandered. Like, yeah, it's just more for cars and stuff.
Yeah, it might get better. But yeah, in Chicago, you know, things are a lot colder. Like I have some coworkers where I started my current position at my current library around like December, and I had coworkers that like at the end of the day, they would take the bus back with me. And then now that it's a little bit cooler, or now that it's a little bit warmer, starting in say like April, they started to bike to and from work. Like one of them brings their own bike, the other one does a divvy bike. So the other one of them, I think they ride their bike from my library on the south side all the way to where they live around like I think Edgewater, Andersonville. And then the other one, she takes a divvy bike to the train station instead of walking or taking the bus. And so for both of them, I'd assumed that they were like transit users all year round, and probably they still use it a bit, but like they were a particular type of rider who only uses it in the winter, because the CTA's ridership numbers are the lowest in the winter. And this probably goes for other transit agencies in colder climates, which most of them are. But yeah, it's like there's this certain category of cyclists in Chicago who will abandon their bikes and then only use the CTA really in the winter.
Yeah. No, I think that's like, it's all about just extending that season. Like, I think there's going to be like in the coldest depths of the Chicago winter, there's probably going to be like a 2-3 week span or maybe month span where I just cannot get on a bicycle and I cannot will myself to do it. I'll just have to figure it out. But yeah, it's just extending the season for people. Like little stuff like buying a better pair of gloves and like merino wool cycling tights that I wear underneath my clothes. Like stuff like that can really like stretch out what's comfortable and possible.
Yeah, I've met people who are troopers who do it all winter long.
Yeah, but it bleeds into your personality, I think. I think it like changes you. Like you become, I don't know, I think I have that like kind of glutton for punishment attitude in a lot of things. Like I think pain is really good for people. I'm not like one of those like Huberman, like self-improvement guys or anything, but I think that like people should be in pain more than they usually are. But like, I don't know, that's kind of dicey to toss that into your work commute. It is, you're going to be in a bad mood if you started your day like pushing yourself to the limit. I biked on a really rainy day recently and it did like, the rest of the day was shit. Like I was just trying to dry myself off on a job site and that's not fun. I think I was just shorter with people and just not as fun to be around.
Yeah, I mean, for people listening who've never been to Chicago or never lived in like a cold place, like when it's really cold and I go to meet up with someone and I've been outside for too long, I have to explain to them like my face is cold.
Yeah, I'm defrosting. I've like said that to people. Like I'm defrosting a bit. I'll be like a fun, good conversation in like 5 minutes. But right now I'm just like fighting for my life.
Yeah, because you can't like move your face the same way.
Yeah, no, that's real.
And then what other like limits do you think are there for like why biking might not be the dominant mode of transit?
I think that like we touched on this earlier, but like the American temperament, if I can talk about this very vague idea, like I don't think America has a love affair with cars as people say that it does. I'm more of the like, I think I touched on this in the past episode, like people do choose just the most like reasonable option to get places. And we've just made a system where it is easier to use a car and people just do that out of default. But I think there will be like stragglers in the end that like, even if it's the more convenient way to get around, people won't choose it because of like, the way they grew up or something. So we'll always run up against that. We just have such a inertia of car driving in America. But it's just interesting. Like I was watching some urbanist video and it was about like this Spanish city that's built a whole bunch of bike infrastructure and it had no cycling culture before, but they're building it from scratch was kind of the thesis of the video. And this guy was on a bike lane and they were pretty narrow because they don't really have too much space for bikes yet. And he pointed out a group of people biking very close to each other, like side by side. And he's like, they must be Dutch. And they go past and they're all like speaking Dutch. And it's because they're so used to like biking tightly to each other. They have the skill of it, of like informally sharing space in a way that like that had been built up over decades. Basically. And then this place in Spain has had a cycling culture for 5 years and people haven't built up the ability to like do that.
If I biked with you, I'm sure I'd hit you.
And so I think it's like a skill that not a person develops, but that a culture develops over time. like the ability to navigate space and negotiate space. I think that right now, like everyone's pretty bad at it. I just see like a general kind of level of cluelessness when I'm biking around, of just like drivers being inattentive, cyclists being inattentive. Like I was behind a cyclist who was just annoyed me, of like, he was waiting to like run a red light. So he was checking both sides to see if traffic was coming. And he was so busy doing that, he missed that the light turned green for him. And I was like kind of stuck behind him, and I just went green. He's like, oh, I know. And I'm like, dude, if you like, it would be easier if you followed the law. It would be easier for you. But yeah, so I think that, not that everyone is part of some kind of hive mind, but I think that the like how we navigate cities hive mind can get smarter and more developed over time. I think that there's a lot of like ways to go up from there. I think we need to heal from the over demarcation of like how we talk about space. And I think that a lot of cyclists in Chicago, or just in America broadly, were drivers before they were cyclists, unless they're real like gold star cyclists who have never touched a car or something, which I don't really think that's a large group of people. I think it's just frustrated drivers, kind of like myself, who are like, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm going to bike. And they kind of bring that attitude to biking. But I think this can all be
I do know
healed.
some people who I grew up with, who I still follow on Instagram, where I do think they did grow up here and biking is their dominant form, and they've never driven a car. So I do know some, I think.
Out there. Yeah.
But yeah, another thing that I think might be inhibiting bikes from ever being the dominant mode of transit is just like Americans aren't that fit. Like I read a statistic recently where like apparently once Americans are after the age of 30, only like 10% ever sprint again for the entire duration of their lives. Can you imagine that? Like hitting 30 and then just never running ever again?
No. Before I did rugby, I remember like I was just doing a lot of like gym stuff. I wasn't doing much cardio because I was like falling into that mental trap that a lot of like American gym guys fall into, of like, you gotta bulk, like cardio kills gains, yada yada. All that. And then when I got into rugby and I like sprinted for the first time, I was like racking my brain to think of the last time I sprinted. And I was like, oh geez, thank God I joined this sport. Yeah, no, like just the base level of fitness for an American is so, and not just like, I don't know, weight or any of that, but just think about like balance and like what's kind of asked of you being on a bicycle. Like, I don't know, there's like tons of people. I always try and convince people I'm with, like, come on, let's get on the Divvy. There's even a thing in the Bike Share Divvy app where you can, since I have the membership, I can have like, I can give someone my discounted rate like 3 times a month or something. So I'm like, literally and it's going to get billed to me anyway. So like, come on, like, let's just do this. And just a lot of people be like,
I would do that with, after doing this episode. Yeah. If we ever are in a situation, I would ride a bike with you.
Yeah. I think it would be a good little lesson. I'd choose a very like low stress, like bike way or something. Broadway, no. Broadway's pretty intense, but there's some protected parts of it. Yeah. One little bit on the like the biking barriers thing. So I'm gonna hop a period. And then so other like smaller barriers to people biking. I don't know. It seems like everyone does seem to own a bike. Whenever I talk to people, everyone says like, "Oh yeah, I have a bike," and I was like, "Oh, do you bike?" And they're like, "No." And so this is like a small soapbox I shall lightly step on, but if you don't own a bike pump, you don't really own a bike. Is a weird thing, I believe. Like I'll talk to people and be like, "Oh, why don't you bike?" I'm like, "Oh, I have a flat. I'm like gonna get it fixed and all that." There's like a bike shop near me, and I'm like, "All right, so what if you get a flat again? Like, what's gonna happen there? Like this is a situation that like is never gonna fully resolve itself." I think it's just little stuff like that just impedes people. I will say that like not everyone knows how to change a bike flat, but I think it's just one of those skills that people learn. But yeah, people are afraid of like biking on streets. That's the most understandable one. It's just the like bike protection is not there, the dedicated lanes and stuff. That Nimesh guy touched on this really sad study that I can't get out of my head, which is that like, we were talking about health earlier. When you bike, you have much better health outcomes, but past a certain point, like once you're spending more than 6 hours or so biking, like your mortality then rises, and that's just because eventually you're going to get hit by a car. And it's so sad to me because I was like, I just got an alert on my like Apple Fitness thing, like, wow, your level of activity has really risen over 2 months. Like, good for you. And I'm like, yeah, I do feel healthier too, but like, I might just get hit someday. Nothing's stopping that.
Yeah. I mean, you already have a crazy scar on your forearm from biking, right?
Yeah. And then I don't know, I got a pretty bad concussion when I was in high school from biking as well. So things come in threes. I'm just waiting for the shoe to drop.
Yeah. Hopefully not.
Yeah.
And then I think it would just be nice to like summarize a bit of like what I kind of figured out through this episode, just because yeah, you wanted to do this even more than I did. But this was all sort of in response to my own bike skepticism. So yeah, I think my bike skepticism originates from like my perception of the temperament of American cyclists. They might just be angry because they're experiencing de-individuation. But yeah, they do have a reason to be angry because there's so few bike lanes. But yeah, I think maybe they just need to chill out.
I think that like this, I don't know, you can talk about individuals versus the group, but I think that like as things become more of a bike grid of networks, of protected lanes, of people being, of even drivers expecting to see cyclists, pedestrians expecting to anticipate them, like just kind of the floor of the worst behavior will rise, I think. And then just things will become generally better as it becomes more of an expected thing.
Yeah, as it becomes as it becomes more normal to bike and it becomes safer to bike, you might get people who aren't just like high T ADH guys.
Yeah, because it's a self-sorting thing of like the people most likely to bike statistically are always just like fit, lightly crazy 20-something-year-old men. You know, and then once you make it easier, then the grandmas come in and the like moms and like everyone else kind of joins it. But there's always going to be that vanguard. But you got to give the like crazy 20-something-year-old guys credit of like they are the annoying guys at critical mass, or the people who show up for things, like the annoying shrill bike people are like doing it so we don't have to.
Oh my gosh, you know what I just realized? So I have this friend group. I don't really have gay friends, but I do have like one sort of gay friend group, which is kind of bizarre. It's like we're all interested in, well, I'm not interested in biking, but they're all interested in biking and urbanism. We all speak Portuguese. We're all interested in politics. We have this like kind of crazy, we have this kind of crazy group chat. But anyways, I just realized that like, yeah, two of the people I know in this social circle, they're like bikers, you know, young, white, 20-something men, but they're gay and have ADHD, which is actually, I feel like, kind of a rare combo.
I don't know about that. I think this is a type. Back when I was on Twitter, I feel like I was like lightly overlapped with this like gay cycling urbanist world.
But yeah, I guess the gay cyclists are also high T ADHD guys.
You use the high T ADHD like describer a lot, and I guess I'm maybe looking for it more now.
No, I use high T as a euphemism for mask, because if I, as a gay man, I'm always like, oh, that's masculine. It just sounds lame.
This is a more biologically essentialist view of it, but it's useful. I mean, I'm kind of looking for the patterns now, I guess.
But yeah, I think that also my bike skepticism was later reinforced with the emergence of bike infrastructure across Chicago. Because plastic curbs do look kind of strange, and I don't like them. But yeah, I do think my ideal street or road would have very little in terms of just like anything. I love the pictures of like, you know, early 20th century streets of across America. They just look so beautiful with little in them, and like there's pedestrians walking down the middle of the street. Like I would love to live in a world like that, but I don't get to.
No, brick streets is good stuff. And like these green painted bike lanes, like all right, but I noticed in like other countries what they do is they just lay down like red tinted, like a brick colored asphalt that's just the same plane as the like driving asphalt, and that just looks so much better. It's just like a more natural kind of color, I think, like a dull red versus like the bright urgent green, you know? I don't know, little stuff like that I think matters in terms of cohesive street.
I mean, I think it's fine for us to use like that bright green for now, because it's a new concept for drivers.
You have to teach people basically.
But maybe we can get to that eventually. And I do think my opinions changed a little bit working on this episode. Like I would be open to going and riding a bike with you now. I wouldn't before. I do think I'm at higher risk of dying than other people. I'm just kind of out of it.
But I think that everyone can build that skill. I think I'm a better cyclist than I was a year ago. You know?
But I do think Chicago is a train city. We need to like double down on that instead of thinking that people are going to bike in the winter.
Yeah, it's fair.
But you have any final thoughts?
No, I just, you know, cyclists are not all annoying spandex psychopaths. We're people, just like you and me. And then as we mentioned in the beginning of the episode, we now have a Patreon. We're going to link it. Again, it's pretty cheap. It's the basic membership is only $2 a month, and it'll get you access to like every third episode that we do, because every third episode you're now only going to be able to listen to it on Patreon. And we're not big enough that anyone's going to post it anywhere online. Yeah.
So you're going to have to make the call and decide if we're worth $2 a month.
I'll feel so complimented when someone starts stealing and posting all our episodes. I'll be like, oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, they've done that with Red Scare, but they don't even do that with NymFed alumni.
Oh.
Even though they're huge and I love them.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you again and have a good week.
See ya.
See you. Bye.